Picture a peaceful small-town American backdrop, white picket fences, folks greeting each other at the local diner flags, fluttering under a wide-open sky. Into this scene roars a band of rough bikers dead set on muscling in where they don't belong. That's when a silver-haired whirlwind named Maggie Cavanaugh steps in. She's no ordinary grandmother. She's a decorated veteran whose canine partners still move with the discipline and grit of frontline troops. Suddenly, it's a clash that feels straight out of a classic Western or an edge-of-your-seat Clint Eastwood flick. If you want to see how old-school bravery meets modern-day menace, you won't want to miss this tale. The stakes couldn't be higher. Private property, personal liberty, and a whole community's future hang in the balance. Stick around to hear the rest of Maggie's electrifying showdown. And while you're here, do us a favor. Subscribe to our channel because we have more heart-stopping stories ahead that folks like you will appreciate. Margaret Maggie Cavanaugh was not the type of woman most people would notice twice when strolling down the quiet streets of Greenwood, Montana. At 90 years old, Maggie had silver-white hair that she usually pinned up in a neat bun, and her slight frame moved more slowly these days. To anyone in town who saw her picking out vegetables in Yates's general store or sipping coffee at the Greenwood diner, she seemed like an ordinary elderly resident passing her twilight years in peace. But appearances could be deceiving. What no one outside of Greenwood realized was that Maggie Cavanaugh was one of the most highly decorated canine handlers in the history of the U.S. military. Decades earlier, she had served on numerous deployments, partnered with dogs trained in everything from search and rescue to advanced security protocols. More than 200 successful missions under her belt meant that Maggie learned to see threats before they arose and to neutralize them with swift precision. These days, her battlefield had shrunk to the modest 5-acre piece of land she'd settled on after retiring, tucked next to a thick stretch of national forest. Her property was a ramshackle ranch house alongside a small barn converted into a training facility. That's where her 3 dogs lived. Atlas, a 10-year-old German shepherd with flecks of gray around his muzzle. Bravo, a lively 7-year-old Belgian Malinois, whose ears and eyes constantly scanned every movement. And Nova, a 5-year-old Dutch shepherd, whose strength was visible in her muscular build. Together, they were Maggie's loyal companions, her family since her husband passed away over a decade ago. On a chilly morning, Maggie prepared breakfast for the dogs. Each of them waited at the command at ease before stepping forward to their bowls, a testament to their military-style discipline. While she rocked gently on an old wooden chair on her porch, Maggie heard the distant rumble of motorcycles, an unfamiliar sound in peaceful Greenwood. She narrowed her eyes at the road that bordered her land, watching the line of bikes roar by, 10, maybe 12, all sporting the same emblem. A crimson hawk with outspread wings. Doesn't feel right, Maggie muttered to Atlas, who had come to rest his head near her knee. We've seen enough to trust our instincts, haven't we? Old friend. A few hours later, she climbed into her well-maintained old pickup truck and drove into Greenwood, passing by the Greenwood diner, where the motorcycles were parked in a neat row. Several unfamiliar faces in black leather vests emblazoned with the same hawk emblem milled around the sidewalk. They exuded an air of arrogance and coiled aggression. Inside Yates's general store, Linda Yates stood at the counter, looking flustered. "Maggie, I'm so glad to see you," Linda said, dropping her voice. "That group outside, they came in here earlier, tried to sell some protection, as if we don't already have our own insurance." Maggie set down her basket. "Same thing happened at the diner." Linda nodded. "They're calling themselves the Iron Hawks. Claim they're just passing through, but it doesn't feel that way." Before Maggie could reply, the bell over the door jangled. 3 of the bikers walked in. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a graying beard, stepped to the counter. His vest read, "Chainsaw Donovan." He eyed Linda and then turned his gaze to Maggie, letting a slow, humorless smile crease his face. "Morning, ladies," Chainsaw said, scanning the shelves. "My men and I are making ourselves known in Greenwood. Figured we'd drop by and see if we can help out. For a fee?" Linda bristled. "We're not interested. We have everything we need here." Chainsaw leaned one forearm on the counter. "I doubt that the world's gotten dangerous. Places like Greenwood can't handle trouble on their own." Maggie watched from the aisle, noticing how Chainsaw's 2 companions fanned out behind him, one with a shaved head and arms like tree trunks, the other a wiry man with eyes that flickered around the store. She placed a bag of dog food in her basket, the movement drawing the wiry man's attention. "Something you want to add?" "Grandma?" he asked, stepping closer with a sneer. Maggie met his gaze calmly. "Just picking up supplies." She offered the hint of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I can hear your business discussion from halfway across the store." "Nosy old bat," he murmured, leaning in as if to intimidate her. "You talk a lot for someone who knows nothing about me," Maggie said evenly. Turning back toward Linda. "Ring me up," Linda Chainsaw cocked his head. "That a fact, so maybe I should learn more about who you are?" He hooked his thumbs in his belt and sized her up. "Local, right? Got a ranch just outside of town." "Living alone, I hear I have dogs," Maggie replied mildly, "and plenty of friends." The tension thickened. Linda's hands trembled as she rang up Maggie's purchases. The man with the shaved head glowered, shifting from one foot to another. Chainsaw flicked his gaze to Linda again. "We'll be back tomorrow to finalize the details of your coverage. Don't keep us waiting." The three men sauntered out, leaving an unmistakable sense of unease in their wake. Linda let out a breath. "This doesn't feel like a passing group. I heard rumors they caused all kinds of trouble in Grayson County last month." Maggie nodded. "Extortion protection rackets. They won't stop until they get what they want. Sheriff Fletcher know about this. I called him." "He's doing what he can," Linda replied, "but we only have so many deputies." Outside, Maggie saw Sheriff George Fletcher stepping out of his patrol car. He looked relieved to see her. "Heard those bikers came in here," Fletcher said quietly. "You all right, Maggie?" She nodded. "I've faced worse, Sheriff, but they're not bluffing." His eyes hardened. "I know. The mayor, Calvin Westwood, says they might bring in tourist dollars. He's either blind or in someone's pocket. For now, we don't have enough to run them out." Maggie climbed into her truck, her purchases carefully placed on the passenger seat. "You watch yourself, George. I have a feeling they'll test the limits of this town sooner rather than later." Sheriff Fletcher nodded, but worry etched his features. "Maggie, I know you can handle yourself, but remember you're not alone. Folks around here respect you." Maggie's lips curved into a faint smile. "I appreciate that, but these Iron Hawks Chainsaw, Donovan especially, should remember something: looks can be deceiving." As Maggie pulled away from the store, her mind churned with memories from her military years. She'd seen men like these before in dusty markets on foreign soil, swaggering with false bravado, preying on the vulnerable. The Iron Hawks might believe Greenwood was ripe for picking especially, since it had minimal law enforcement and an older population, but that assumption was about to be tested. Back home, dusk settled around Maggie's ranch. She locked up the barn where she'd painstakingly maintained a training area for Atlas Bravo and Nova. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep them sharp. She did a last perimeter walk, the dogs at her side, each scanning the tree line and corners of the yard. Satisfied, she headed indoors. She placed her newly purchased supplies in the pantry, humming softly to keep her mind calm. With arthritic but steady hands, Maggie checked her service pistol. Old habits from the battlefield never truly died. They merely adapted to new frontiers. Tomorrow she expected trouble. Men like Chainsaw Donovan didn't make empty threats. And if the Iron Hawks thought an elderly woman living in the shadow of National Forest was an easy target, well, they were about to learn that Maggie Cavanaugh was not easy prey. Her last thought before drifting into a light soldier's sleep was a line she'd once heard from her commanding officer: "Never underestimate someone who's been underestimated their whole life." Morning light washed over Greenwood. Maggie woke early, as she always did, slipping out to the porch with a mug of black coffee in hand. The dogs were already on patrol. It gave her a sense of quiet satisfaction, seeing the three of them, Atlas the eldest leading Bravo and Nova in an efficient sweep of the yard. Each dog was a testament to her lifetime of training expertise. They needed that discipline more than ever with trouble brewing. Her phone buzzed on the porch table. The display read, "Ethan Cavanaugh, Maggie's grandson." He rarely called at this hour unless it was something important. "Maggie Cavanaugh," she answered in a no-nonsense voice. "Grandma, hey, I'm about 20 miles from Greenwood. Thought I'd drop in." "Hope that's okay." Relief mingled with caution. Ethan had served in the Army Rangers for a dozen years, following in Maggie's military footsteps. "Of course it's okay," she said. You know, the dogs remember you, but thanks for the warning. His laugh was a warm sound over the line. I'll be there soon. I just rotated out of my last deployment, so I'm officially a civilian. That's the best news I've heard in years, Maggie replied, feeling genuine joy. Drive safe. She hung up, gazing out over her property. Perhaps Ethan's arrival was a stroke of luck. She had planned to face the Iron Hawks alone, but two sets of trained eyes and two sets of skilled hands would double their odds. After tidying up, Maggie unloaded a fresh supply of dog food into the barn, making sure everything was in place. She'd just closed the doors when she heard Ethan's motorcycle coming up the gravel driveway. The dogs remained relaxed. They recognized the sound and scent of a friendly approach. Ethan parked and hopped off, removing his helmet to reveal a face that looked so much like Maggie's late son, it sometimes startled her. Tall, lean, and with a keen alertness in his eyes, he crossed the yard to embrace Maggie gently. Permission to enter, Commander, he joked, using a family tradition that referenced her old rank as a chief K9 handler. Granted, Maggie said, hugging him. Welcome home, Atlas approached first, sniffing Ethan before letting out a short, happy bark. Bravo and Nova followed, wagging their tails in greeting. Over a breakfast of eggs and toast, Maggie filled Ethan in on the Iron Hawks, how they'd rolled into Greenwood a few days prior, strong-arming local shop owners and making ominous threats. She described Chainsaw Donovan, the mayor's ambiguous stance, and the sheriff's limited manpower. Protection racket, Ethan said, classic intimidation. They pick a small town with minimal law enforcement muscle in and start collecting money. Exactly, Maggie agreed. Only difference is Greenwood's home to a stubborn old woman who's seen worse than a handful of bikers. Ethan frowned. Mayor Westwood is either complicit or clueless. If there's something bigger behind the Iron Hawks, we might have more to worry about than a few extortionists. Maggie's gaze drifted to the framed photos on her wall, images of her in uniform standing alongside K9 partners from decades past. I've got a hunch there's more going on too. It's not just the racketeering. They mentioned property, my property specifically, and if Westwood's involved, he's wanted it for years. Always badgering me with development offers, could be valuable land. Ethan murmured, glancing outside at the thick forest beyond. Maybe there's something out there. Minerals, resources, Maggie set her mug down, I suspect. But that means the Iron Hawks aren't just random thugs. They might be working for someone else, bigger pockets. For now, let's focus on the immediate threat. If they plan to escalate intimidation, it'll happen soon. They went out to the barn so Maggie could show Ethan the training upgrades she'd made. She had short obstacle courses for the dogs, hidden contraptions for advanced scent work, and a small armory for her personal use, largely for predator control, but easily adapted for more serious confrontations. I see you've kept busy, Ethan remarked with admiration, running a hand over a set of protective dog vests. Boredom's never been my style, Maggie said, half smiling, and if trouble finds me, I won't be caught unprepared. Later that afternoon, they headed into town together. The Greenwood diner was empty except for a few locals. A row of motorcycles still lined the curb, and the Iron Hawks were scattered at various storefronts. Linda Yates stood behind her general store counter with forced politeness as two bikers loomed over her. Across the street, Henry Patterson, owner of the hardware store, was in a tense conversation with another small group of Iron Hawks. Sheriff Fletcher observed from his squad car, frustration evident. He barely had enough deputies to respond to genuine emergencies, let alone stand guard on every street corner. He signaled Maggie and Ethan over Mayor Westwood called for a meeting this evening at Town Hall. Fletcher said, his voice low. He wants to address the increase in visitors. As if it's just tourism, I don't trust him, but we've got to go. Maggie nodded. We'll be there. Ethan scanned the bikers with a soldier's gaze. They're watching everyone, looking for weaknesses. Any actual arrests yet? Sheriff Fletcher sighed. They're too careful. They speak in hints and metaphors. No overt crimes, just heavy-handed suggestions and pay-up demands that no one has formally reported. Everyone's scared. Even if Linda or Henry pressed charges, it'd be their word against the Iron Hawks. And Westwood keeps saying we're overreacting. The three parted ways. Maggie and Ethan retrieved their groceries, though the mood in the store was tense. Linda swallowed nervously as she rang them up. I'm sorry this is happening, Maggie. You sure you want to poke these folks? Maggie offered a reassuring pat on Linda's arm. We'll handle it. They could feel eyes on them the entire time the Iron Hawks were assessing measuring. Possibly they saw Ethan's bearing straight back, calm, scanning corners. Maybe they realized Maggie was not as frail as she appeared. A flicker of recognition passed over one biker's face when he saw Maggie's posture. It reminded him of someone with real training. By nightfall, the town meeting was in full swing. Mayor Calvin Westwood stood at the front of the modest town hall, wearing an expensive suit and a wide smile. My friends, Greenwood is facing a new opportunity. The Iron Hawks here are travelers who bring business. Business. Henry Patterson interrupted, anger coloring his voice. They're shaking down my store for protection fees. That's not business, that's extortion. Mayor Westwood gave a dismissive chuckle. Let's not jump to conclusions. We have to confirm details. What else do you need? Confirmed, Linda Yates fired back. They demanded money from me in broad daylight. Sheriff Fletcher knows it. The sheriff rose. We're investigating, but we need concrete evidence. Mayor, we can't deny the intimidation. People feel threatened. Westwood waved a hand. Threatened by a few bikers passing through. Come on, we don't want Greenwood to develop a bad reputation for turning away tourists. At this, several people groaned or whispered among themselves. Maggie stood in the back with Ethan. She scanned the room, noting the presence of a few Iron Hawks near the walls, arms crossed, exuding silent menace. When the mayor called for public comments, Maggie stepped forward. Her voice was soft but carried throughout the room. You're gambling our town's future on a dangerous bet, Mayor. I'm asking you to reconsider for everyone's sake. Westwood's composure slipped a notch. He cleared his throat, ignoring her concern. Meeting dismissed, he said abruptly, giving a tight smile. We'll revisit this in a few days. One of the bikers shot Maggie a warning glare as people began filing out. Ethan subtly guided her away, hand on her elbow. They don't like that. You spoke up. Maggie's expression remained composed. Let them come. I've faced men like them before. In the parking lot outside Town Hall, heavy footsteps approached. Chainsaw Donovan and two of his men blocked Maggie and Ethan's path. Interesting speech in there, Lady Chainsaw said with a slow, threatening grin. I'd advise you to keep quiet. This is a friendly arrangement we've got with the mayor. No need to stir up trouble. Ethan stepped forward, eyes narrowing. She has a right to speak, and the town has a right to decide its own future. Chainsaw rolled his shoulders as if loosening tight muscles. Maybe I should teach you some manners. He glanced at Maggie. And show your grandma how we deal with meddlers. Maggie remained calm. I've been taught plenty of lessons in my lifetime. None by the likes of you. The tension rose, an electric current in the cool evening air. Before it could erupt, Sheriff Fletcher appeared, flanked by his two deputies. The bikers backed off, expressions cocky but steps reversing. You folks have a nice night, Chainsaw said sarcastically, turning on his heel as the roar of motorcycles echoed out of the parking lot. Maggie exhaled slowly. No turning back now, she murmured. They've shown their hand. Ethan glanced at her. Think we should bring Atlas, Bravo, and Nova into town? Maggie shook her head. No. Let the Iron Hawks underestimate us. They have no idea what my old dogs can do. At dawn, Maggie and Ethan prepared systematically. They reinforced security measures at Maggie's ranch, newly installed motion sensors, angled floodlights, and strategically placed barriers that would control or delay any would-be attackers. Though Maggie's arthritic knees protested, her spirit didn't waver. The next day brought new developments. Sheriff Fletcher arrived, looking grim. We have reason to believe the mayor's meeting privately with Chainsaw Donovan and some outside investors. My deputy overheard chatter about valuable mineral deposits under your land. Seems Westwood cut a deal to develop it if he can pressure you into selling. Maggie's eyes hardened. That explains the mayor's push. And now he's brought in the Iron Hawks to help expedite matters, Fletcher nodded. He's playing with fire, word as these aren't just random bikers. Some are ex-military or connected to bigger criminal networks. They know how to handle themselves. We have to be careful. By mid-afternoon, more of the Iron Hawks had rolled into town, maybe 20 total. Some camped at the local motel. Others parked near the diner. Rumors spread that they demanded money from nearly every storefront. People were frightened, but with the mayor turning a blind eye, official channels were tied. That evening, a local veterinarian, Dr. Lucy Clarkson, came by. Maggie trusted Lucy with all medical matters relating to the dogs. Lucy told them that 2 Iron Hawks had visited her clinic, asking detailed questions about Maggie's dogs. How aggressive they were, How large any health issues they're probing? Ethan concluded after Lucy left. Trying to see if your dogs are a real threat or just for show? Maggie's mouth set into a thin line. They're about to learn the difference. Night fell with a moonless sky. Maggie prepped her service pistol. Ethan checked perimeter sensors. A single red light blinked on the monitor, showing a disturbance at the far edge of the property. Bravo let out a low growl. Ethan frowned at the screen movement near the barn. Could just be deer, but a crash of glass cut through the darkness. Someone had broken a barn window. Maggie and Ethan exchanged a silent nod. She switched off the interior lights, allowing her eyes to adjust. The dogs took positions, every muscle poised for action. A second crash followed by muffled voices. Then came the faint beam of a flashlight sweeping across the barn's interior. Without hesitation, Maggie gave a hand signal to Nova, the swiftest of the trio, to flank around the barn side. Bravo would circle from the opposite direction, while Atlas stayed at Maggie's side. Ethan quietly slipped out the back door to cover angles the dogs couldn't. In the barn's shadows, two iron hawks rummaged through crates and feed sacks, as if searching for something. Grab it all. Donovan wants any records, blueprints, anything the old lady might be hiding, whispered one biker. Shut up and move faster, growled the other, yanking open a cabinet. Nova moved in total silence. By the time the first intruder sensed movement, the dog was already on him, clamping down on his arm in a controlled takedown. The man let out a strangled cry, dropping his flashlight. The second biker whirled, only to meet Bravo's forceful lunge that knocked the wind out of him. Maggie and Ethan arrived seconds later. Ethan secured their weapons while Maggie commanded the dogs to hold Nova, and Bravo maintained perfect discipline, releasing only when Maggie gave a second order. The two bikers lay on the ground, gasping in shock and pain, but they were alive, every limb intact. Sheriff Fletcher pulled up with his patrol car lights flashing. He arrested the pair for trespassing and attempted burglary. Bloodied and humiliated, they spat curses at Maggie, insisting they'd be out by morning and that the rest of the Hawks would show no mercy. Maggie eyed them impassively. Better men have tried, boys. In the aftermath, the tension in Greenwood escalated. Donovan demanded the bikers' release, calling the charges fabricated. Mayor Westwood publicly criticized Fletcher for arresting potential tourists, while half the town shouted for the Iron Hawks to be chased out. Quietly, Maggie urged Fletcher to hold firm. They're looking for an excuse to create chaos. If you let them go free now, it shows weakness. Fletcher sighed. We have just enough to keep them overnight. After that, the DA might have to release them on bail. Ethan spoke up. Then we use the time to strengthen defenses. Maggie's phone rang unexpectedly. It was Westwood. Maggie. We need to talk. I've got an offer for your land more than fair. Meet me at town hall tomorrow. Her jaw tightened. If this is another intimidation stunt, Calvin, save it. Your goons already broke into my barn. He laughed nervously. Nothing of the sort. We'll handle this politely. The next day, under the watchful eye of Sheriff Fletcher, Maggie went to town hall. Westwood was waiting in his private office, accompanied by a polished, middle-aged woman in a suit. She introduced herself as Miss Rollins, a representative from a company called Evercore Resources. She laid out geological surveys that suggested significant lithium deposits beneath Maggie's land. I've never seen these surveys, Maggie said flatly. Rollins shrugged. They're from state records. Don't worry about the details. If you sell your property to our consortium, you'll be a millionaire several times over. Plus, we'll handle any relocation costs. Maggie's eyes narrowed. Does that consortium happen to employ men like Chainsaw? Donovan Westwood frowned. We're not responsible for the Iron Hawks. They're just a group passing through. Miss Rollins tapped a pen on the table. Mrs. Cavanaugh, the offer is very generous. My clients are prepared to deposit $10 million in your account immediately. Maggie slowly rose. I'm not selling, not to you or anyone else. Her gaze flicked to Westwood. Funny how you didn't mention these mineral deposits when you tried to buy my land at cut-rate prices last year. His face reddened. You're making a mistake, Maggie. She moved to the door. If preserving my home and keeping criminals out of Greenwood is a mistake, so be it. Upon returning home, Maggie relayed the conversation to Ethan Fletcher and Dr. Clarkson, who happened to be checking on the dogs. Ethan whistled. So it's bigger than a local land grab. A multinational corporation wants that lithium. Dr. Clarkson looked worried. They won't just walk away from such a profit. You might be in real danger now. That danger arrived sooner than expected. Late that night, an SUV with tinted windows rolled onto Maggie's property. Headlights off, the motion sensors triggered an alert on Ethan's monitor. "They're here," Ethan whispered, tension crackling in the air. Atlas, Bravo, and Nova stood at attention, ears perked. Maggie's heart thudded as she led the dogs outside, Ethan and Sheriff Fletcher flanking her. Three men stepped out of the SUV, two wearing suits, one in a leather vest. The suited men had the confident posture of trained security operatives. The man in the vest was Donovan. "We're done asking," Donovan said, voice dripping with menace. "Sell your land or lose it." Atlas emitted a low growl that reverberated in the still night air. Maggie gestured the dogs to hold, but keep watch. "Gentlemen," Maggie said calmly, "you've picked the wrong ranch. I'm not selling, and you're trespassing." One of the suited men eyed the dogs. "Ma'am, you should consider your health accidents happen. A heart attack, perhaps, or an unfortunate fire." He paused. "No one wants things to get messy." Fletcher stepped forward, showing his badge. "Enough, you're all under suspicion of conspiracy to commit extortion." The men ignored Fletcher, focusing on Maggie. Donovan spat on the ground. "That shiny badge won't matter when our backers arrive. We have more resources than you can imagine. This land will belong to Evercore Resources unless you prefer to be 6 feet under." In a flash, one of the men reached for a weapon, but the dogs reacted faster. Bravo lunged, disarming him with a well-practiced grip on his wrist, forcing him to drop the gun. Nova seized the second man's leg, knocking him off balance. Donovan started to move, but Atlas was in his path. Teeth bared, Ethan stepped in to help restrain the intruders, while Sheriff Fletcher called for backup. The confrontation ended with the men lying face down in the dirt, disarmed and humiliated. Sirens in the distance signaled arriving deputies. Maggie exhaled, adrenaline coursing through her. She gently patted Atlas on the shoulder. "Good dog." When morning came, those men were locked up. Donovan was charged on multiple counts. The suits turned out to be private security hired by Evercore. But that corporation, upon hearing how the arrest had gone public, immediately disavowed them as rogue agents. Mayor Westwood scrambled to deny any involvement, but an FBI investigation, launched through Fletcher's contacts, began digging into bank transfers and hush-hush deals. In a final community meeting, Maggie announced her decision to keep the land and sign an agreement with a reputable environmental group that would oversee any future exploration responsibly. "We will never let criminals dictate how Greenwood grows," she told a cheering crowd. The Iron Hawks disbanded under the weight of federal arrests and local resistance. Evercore's top officials were indicted on charges tied to intimidation and corruption. Mayor Westwood quietly resigned and skipped town. Weeks later, peace returned to Greenwood. Maggie recovered from the stress under Dr. Clarkson's watchful eye, and her three dogs reveled in well-earned relaxation time. The ranch remained quiet, its owner unapologetically strong. As she sat on the porch at twilight, Maggie stroked Atlas's head, Bravo and Nova lying at her feet. Ethan was inside, fixing dinner. Sheriff Fletcher would drop by soon for a friendly chat about Greenwood's future. And the town, once shaken by bullies on roaring motorcycles, now stood taller and more united than ever. Maggie Cavanaugh, once the most decorated K-9 handler in the military, had faced down foreign adversaries in war zones and come home to face a new breed of enemy. But intimidation and greed were no match for a determined 90-year-old and her trio of loyal, brilliantly trained dogs. They had reminded everyone in Greenwood, and far beyond, that sometimes the fiercest bravery resides in those who've spent a lifetime being underestimated. Now the only rumble in the distance was the wind in the trees, and the only watchers on Maggie's land were the eyes of three devoted canines, ensuring that no intruder would ever again mistake their home for easy prey. Looking back on everything Maggie endured, from prowling biker gangs to corporate schemes, this wasn't just about saving a ranch. It was about preserving the heartbeat of an American hometown, the kind where neighbors still wave hello, and a handshake means something. Maggie's iron will, paired with her remarkable dogs, turn the tide against greed and intimidation. In the end, Greenwood didn't just survive, it thrived, reminded that a united community can stand taller than any outside threat. From a personal standpoint, I find hope in the way folks rallied behind Maggie, proving that age, stubborn knees, and silver hair don't overshadow determination. It's a testament to resilience and the power of coming together when it matters most. Share your own thoughts in the comments. Did this story strike a chord with you? And if you haven't already subscribed, stay tuned for more unforgettable tales of courage and community.